I woke up after surgery, the dull ache in my side still throbbing, but it wasn't the pain that took my breath away. It was the words I heard just beyond the haze of anesthesia. My mother's voice, cold and calculating, asking the doctor, "If we take her other kidney for my son, is that possible?" My heart stopped, not because of the surgery or the accident that brought me here, but because the people who were supposed to love and protect me treated me like a spare part. Like I was nothing more than a backup plan for the perfect son they favored. I wasn't just hurt physically. The real wound was deeper, raw and bleeding inside. I wasn't just the victim of a terrible crash. I was a pawn in a cruel game of survival, where my worth was measured by how useful I could be to someone else. They didn't see me as their daughter anymore. I was just an object, something to be used, sacrificed if necessary, so that my brother, their golden boy, could live. They hadn't asked me. They hadn't told me. They planned it behind my back like a business deal where my life was the price. I lay there, tubes hooked up to my arms, my body weak and fragile, but my mind was wide awake, screaming in silent horror. The betrayal was suffocating. It wasn't the accident or the blood loss that crushed me. It was the realization that my own family was willing to let me die to save someone else. I remembered every second of that moment. The clinical smell of antiseptic mixed with the coldness in my mother's voice. The doctor's hesitant but professional reassurances. The absence of any warmth or comfort from the people who were supposed to hold my hand and tell me it would be okay. Instead, I was abandoned in that sterile hospital room, a casualty of their selfishness and cruelty. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the pain in my soul. I was not just physically wounded. I was shattered. I thought of all the times I had been invisible to them, overshadowed by my brother's achievements, his smiles, the pride they showed him. But I never imagined they would be willing to trade me away like a broken tool. I was the daughter they didn't want, the inconvenient accident who got in the way of their perfect plans. That night, lying in the dim hospital light, I made a promise to myself. I would survive, not just to live, but to make sure they never forgot what they did. I wasn't going to be silent or weak or broken. If they wanted to erase me, to use me up and throw me away, I would fight back. I would rise from that hospital bed stronger than they ever expected. Because the deepest wounds often create the fiercest warriors, and I was ready to become one. Their plan had been to end my story before it truly began. But they didn't know. I was just getting started. My name is Emily Carson, a 17-year-old senior in high school. Growing up, my family's attention was always on my older brother, Jacob. He was the golden child, talented, driven, with a full scholarship waiting for him at a top university. In comparison, I was invisible, the quiet shadow no one really noticed or cared to listen to. One afternoon, we were driving home from school. Jacob was behind the wheel, and I was sitting next to him, headphones on, half listening as he talked about some internship our parents were pushing him to apply for. Then everything changed in an instant. The screech of tires, the crash, the chaos. After the accident, I lost a kidney. Jacob walked away with just a few scratches. But while I was fighting to survive in the hospital, my parents were quietly plotting again, this time planning to take my remaining kidney to save Jacob, to preserve their perfect future. It was like my life was just a bargaining chip in their eyes, and I realized then how little I really mattered to them. I spent weeks in that hospital bed, the sterile walls closing in on me like a cage. Not once did Jacob come to visit. My parents only showed up when the doctors called them, their faces blank and tired, more out of obligation than concern. No one asked if I was okay. No one cared to know how I felt, what I was going through. Not the pain, not the fear, not the crushing loneliness. I became invisible, even as I lay fighting for my life. I started to believe I was nothing more than a burden, a mistake born into this family. Sometimes in the dark silence of the night, I dreamed of simply disappearing, of dying just to give them peace. Maybe then they would be happy. Maybe then the weight of me would finally lift from their shoulders. But then I heard it. That conversation outside my hospital room. The one that shattered any illusions I still clung to. My mother's voice cold and calculated. My father's words dismissive and cruel. They talked about taking my last kidney for Jacob, about how my life didn't matter as much as his future. That was the moment everything inside me broke. And yet, it was also the moment I found the last spark of my strength. I realized I could not let them end my story like that. I had to fight, not just to live, but to reclaim my life on my terms. The next day, I asked the nurse quietly if I could speak with the hospital social worker. I didn't cry, didn't plead. I simply said, I don't feel safe with my parents. Those words were heavy but necessary. The social worker, a gentle woman named Judith, looked at me with a flicker of understanding in her eyes. With Judith's help, a plan began to form. She reported the situation internally, and they pulled the audio recordings from the hospital's hallway cameras and microphones. There was proof, clear, undeniable proof of what my parents had said. It was enough for the hospital to support me. Despite being just a few months shy of 18, with legal assistance and the evidence we gathered, I was granted a temporary legal separation from my parents. They couldn't access my medical records or make decisions for me anymore. A protective order was placed, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a fragile sense of safety. I was transferred to the foster care system. It wasn't glamorous. The apartment was small, the bed hard, and I was surrounded by strangers. But it was safe, and that safety was everything. In foster care, I found a new beginning. I retaught myself how to trust, how to believe in a future not shaped by those who abandoned me. I worked nights at a small bookstore, saving every penny I earned. I refused any financial aid that came with strings attached. I wanted my independence, my freedom, my life on my own terms. I changed my name to Claire Monroe, taking the last name of my great-grandmother, the only woman in my family I ever admired. She was strong, kind, and independent, everything I aspired to be. And with that name came a promise I made to myself every single day. One day, they would see me. Not as the daughter they discarded, but as the woman they could never control. I would be more than their shadow, more than the victim of their cruelty. I would be the force that they could not ignore, the story they never wanted to hear. This was not the end. It was just the beginning of my fight, my rise, and my ultimate reclaiming of who I was meant to be. When I turned 24, I was already the chief operating officer of the fastest-growing healthcare technology company in the state. It was a position I earned through relentless determination, long nights, and a refusal to let my past define me. But nothing could have prepared me for the day the recruiting department sent over a resume that froze me in place. Jacob Carson. Jacob, my brother. The one who had everything handed to him. The golden child, the favored son. He didn't recognize me. Not really. How could he? I was supposed to be gone, forgotten, a ghost erased by their callous choices. But here he was, applying for a job at the company I helped build, completely unaware that the woman holding his fate in her hands was the very person his parents once tried to sacrifice for his future. I invited him for an interview. When he stepped into the executive boardroom, his eyes widened, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. Emily? You're alive? His voice cracked under the weight of his shock. I smiled, but it was cold, calculated. Very much alive, and no longer the person you can look down on. The boardroom was silent, all eyes shifting between us. I pulled out his resume and methodically went through it, highlighting the gaps, the questions about his experience, and the mediocrity masked by entitlement. Then I leaned forward and said, "You had everything handed to you. I had nothing but pain and betrayal. Now, the tables have turned." I wasn't just there to interview him. I was there to send a message. This company doesn't hire people who've built their success by sacrificing others, I said sharply, my gaze piercing. Good luck finding a place that'll tolerate that attitude. Jacob's face flushed crimson, a mix of anger, shame, and helplessness flashing across his features. He opened his mouth to argue but closed it again, realizing this wasn't just a job interview anymore. It was reckoning. After he left, I called Human Resources and instructed them to blacklist his name from any future applications. I went further, notifying all partner firms to reject any consideration of him. It wasn't just about keeping him out of my company. It was about ensuring that his entire network understood the consequences of turning their backs on me. Jacob's rejections piled up. He was shut out everywhere. My parents' financial stability crumbled under the pressure, and soon enough I received a letter. A desperate plea for help, addressed to the daughter they'd long ignored. For the first time, they used that word daughter, but I didn't feel the pull to forgive. I wrote back, my words sharp and final. I was your daughter lying helpless in that hospital bed. You chose Jacob over me. Now live with your choice. There was no room left for hate in my heart anymore. Only peace. The kind that comes from knowing you survived, that you reclaimed your life from those who tried to steal it. The hospital launched a campaign to protect minors from medical abuse by their families, naming it the Claire Protection Protocol, after the name I had chosen for myself when I rebuilt my identity. I wasn't named in honor of the victim I once was. I was honored as the survivor I had become. My story wasn't just about pain. It was about strength, resilience, and the power to rewrite your own ending.